The app environment in South Africa is particularly interesting right now, especially with the boom of smartphones. In the last year, we've seen significant changes in the number of smartphone penetration in South Africa. Vodacom has seen huge growth in number of consumers actually taking up data bundles. So they've gone from 26% of the user base in the last year using data bundles to now over 85% of their prepaid base using data bundles. So the inclination for users to know when to use data and how to use it is growing. That's a first key step in us understanding that the app environment is going to grow really quickly in South Africa. Already we've seen most kind of the largest apps in South Africa, F&B, Vodacom, with over 1.5 to 2 million downloads. Out of the total number of smartphones sitting at around 20 million, that's not significant, so still a small portion. And one of the hugest problems there, what we see is actually people not understanding how to download apps. So a lot of users don't know what the App Store is. They're used to using native apps, so whatever is on their phone, and they're not aware of what the app is or how to download it. So there's a huge education drive, and this is not only in the emerging market but also in the very established market. We spoke to the guys from 24 who launched My Edit, which is a local kind of content app that aggregates all of their content, and they found interestingly a huge amount of education that they had to do into high LSM areas. Predominantly kind of white, high LSM traditional areas where you'd expect people to know how to maybe update apps because they've been living with smartphones for a while, and they had no idea. Middle-aged housewives with no idea how to kind of do that. And then the same kind of talks to the lower end emerging market, which is also learning how to download, what implication it has on their data, etc. The simplicity of the app also needs to be kept into account. South Africans like things pretty simple, so I think that's one of the things that we need to just kind of keep into account. I think there's some important things to look at. Firstly is why build an app, and I think that's one of the key things that we're faced as agencies and advertisers. A lot of agencies will jump to build an app because there's huge revenues and behind it. Production charges are sometimes 10 to 15 times higher than it should be. And I think brands need to hold their agencies very accountable when it comes to building an app, because I can guarantee 90% of the time a Mobi site would actually suffice. And we need to keep that in mind, that a lot of the time jumping to build an app and then expecting huge numbers on the downloads is actually not viable. So one of the key first things to look at is functionality, and does it actually provide some kind of feature or service that's going to better my life in the long run. Functionality is one of the key things to remember when producing an app. And what are the key features that you're going to provide? So what is the user benefit at the end of the day? So if I can go and get what you're giving me on the app on a Mobi site or a website, there's no point in downloading an app. However, if there is functional utility, which is the important word here, then the app is useful. The prime example here is Vodacom, F&B, any of the banks actually for that matter, a DSTV with the ability to control your Explorer. There is functionality behind that application, and that's when we really start understanding that's the real reason that you want to actually go and build an app. So we need to understand that as the core fundamental. The second important thing to understand is, what are the top apps in South Africa? So what are people actually downloading or consuming? And it's three things. Messaging apps is the first one. Social media apps is the second one. And then games, surprisingly, come up top. So if you look at the top App Store downloads across Nokia or the Windows Phone apps, the Google Play Store and the Apple Store, you're looking at those three categories coming out tops. With banking apps, so branded apps, generally very few part of the time actually make it into the top 10. Too few agencies take their clients' real needs into account, the business need. And we just want to build an app for the sake that we can enter it into a board. And that's so sad, because it costs companies in excess of hundreds of thousands of rands, where apps should not cost that at the end of the day. They're not updated. They're not kept up to date. And I think companies really need to understand that, number one, building an app is either a long-term investment for building, and building that database behind that, or it's a throwaway. I don't believe that building apps for feature phones or feature phone related apps are really important. I think that rather using native kind of, through Opera Mini, that's how they access. 70% of them are accessing via that. So rather just have the Mobi site, have it very simple, and use it through that. So I think, yeah, there's some really cool entrepreneurial things guys are doing there, but they're either using an existing app, i.e. social media, or they're using a native or just a traditional Mobi site. So, I think, again, the investment needs to make sense, and I don't think you've got too many barriers to entry when it comes to building an app for the feature phone for that kind of. It's just not. It's not right now. The ability to communicate are in the top 10 of all of our app stores in South Africa, with 3 or 4 of the top apps in the top 10 being communication type apps. Secondly, social media, again, communication. And thirdly, games. And I think games is the really interesting one in South Africa. So the gaming market in South Africa has grown considerably because smartphones are allowing a lot of people access to high quality games, the Need for Speeds, the World of Warcrafts, etc., for people that would never be able to afford a PS4 or an Xbox. So a lot of the emerging and emerged market are using their phones to play games on this sort of very young market. 2.5 million online gamers in South Africa, of which 1.5 million of those are actually accessing via their phone. That's massive. And I mean, that's one of the highest ratios in the world. So I think, let's always keep that into account, that when we're, adding or building an app, there needs to be an element of gamification, different to games, obviously. But South Africans enjoy the simple, the outlet of just playing Candy Crush or something silly like that. So I think, we're less on. The high end is very much against the functional utility side, but the mass and the middle of it is very much keeping it simple with communication, social, and you've really got to show some type of value if you want them to download the app, because there's got to be some type of return at the end of the day. So I think that's that's important to keep in mind. If you do have an app, and this is one of the things that I just see many companies just do so terribly wrong. If you do have an app, use the native app functionality to communicate with your customers. So 2 things that are really important. The OLX guys do this incredibly well. Using push functionality for the app to actually push updates to your phone. It's a fantastic way to actually get updates to people, and you can be so targeted because you have all the data from what they're doing on the app. The second thing is allowing people to customize that app. The functionality around the Vodacom app allowing you to kind of customize how you want that to look. When you do it right, it's amazing, and it gets people to come back and return. But if you don't update with every iteration of a new operating system, which a lot of guys forget, they're very late to update their apps because, again, companies are charging an arm and a leg, and the updates shouldn't cost you. That should be built into the retainer. So always make sure that your companies are aware of the updates and what new content are you going to be adding on. So that's an important piece.